Papa, do not come over here, okay? Hi, Bob.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Just running around, making sure all of this is working the way it should. How are you? And Bob, just as a heads up, you have a lot of background noise going on.
Do is to work with underrepresented entrepreneurs and founders and talent and right size the playing field for all of them. We believe that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. We work to change that. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. I'm thrilled to have them and to be able to have such a great pedigree of professionals here to speak with you about communication strategies for small businesses. We couldn't be more thrilled. I'd like to also say thank you to our presenting sponsors, Bank of the West. We also are working with Delta and Facebook to help us put this BIZCON event on. One of our first panelists that I'm thrilled to introduce is Robert Alanis. Bob, thank you so much for joining. He's a senior partner and chief media strategist at Milagro Strategy Group. Not only does he have an amazing resume, but I'll also let you guys know that he's a former national media trainer for the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, which means he takes all the people that are not quite sure how to speak, and he's done years and years of helping them communicate better with you, their constituents. I think that that is quite impressive, and we're so thrilled to have him here today. In addition, we also have Brenda Mendes. She is a partner, branding and marketing strategist at Snow. Brenda has worked with a number of startups, scaled e-commerce brand in just under 4 years. It's really impressive that she's here. She might be off video, so just keep that in mind. Technical difficulties sometimes arise. But really what's so great is that Brenda has ventured out on her own to consult, and she works with big startups and small startups alike to help brands with their communication strategy. We also have Luis Cachua here. We're so excited to have him as well. So he's the director of multicultural strategy and brand partnerships for Food Beast. The man knows what he is talking about, and I am so thrilled that he's able to speak not only on this panel, but a number of ones that we have coming up for BIZCON. He has extensive experience in helping organizations better understand and communicate to their multicultural customers, and has had a number of marketing leadership roles, including Gap, Wells Fargo, Northwest Mutual. But I think the greatest thing about all of our panelists right now is how much they lean in to help small businesses during this time. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us, and have each of our panelists have just 1 second to speak about themselves. So Bob, I'd like you to take the floor there.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. My career in this business started some 40 years ago when I was the press secretary to the governor of Texas, until I moved out to California to take on the job as a director of public relations for the Miller Brewing Company. I was all of 25 years old and single and looking forward to coming to the West Coast and drinking all the beer I could. And that lasted, all of about 3 years until I got recruited by CBS Television to go handle their public affairs, and then eventually transcended into doing some on-air reporting for local station Channel 2. Then left them after about 6 years and went back into politics, running political campaigns for Gloria Molina, helped got elected to city council and then county board of supervisors, and then went to work for Hill and Knowlton, which at the time was the world's largest public relations firm, where I handled crisis communications for a number of clients, both internationally and nationally. It's interesting because in this current time of a pandemic, we are certainly in a crisis. So we're going to talk a little bit about communication strategies during a crisis to make sure you stay in touch with your customers, stay in touch with your clients, and that you minimize any sort of impact that the pandemic is having for you. I'm now a senior partner and founder of a group called Milagro Strategy Group. We're a California public affairs firm, and we've got significant large clients, including small clients, and currently working with a number of elected officials as well. Some who have recently been in the newspaper. We won't mention names, but you can read about it over the last 2 days. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Bob. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to have Luis just say a few words about himself as well. Luis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I'm super excited to be here. I just want to say that my journey has been inspired by my father's journey as an entrepreneur early on. He was an immigrant to this country, and I was the oldest child. He lost his job, his company, actually about 30 years ago. And I throughout my journey, whether it was at Wells, Northwestern Mutual, and then volunteering with a lot of things with the SBA and SBDC in Orange County, I always wish that there was someone that had reached out to him when he had his small business as an immigrant, non-English speaking. And so that's always fueled me, because I always know that if my father had someone to help him, his life would have been different. Our life would have been different. But, regardless of that, one of the things he always taught us was to give back. And so throughout my journey, even though I've been a professional marketer by nature, just by heart, I've always loved to reach out and figure out how we as a collective of creatives and marketers and communicators, we can help amplify this message of asking for help, asking the ones that need and have less resources, and figuring out how we can grow this ecosystem for immigrant entrepreneurs in this country. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And that is one of the things that we also do here at Pixel Exchange. We'll be putting some more information on the chat if you're unaware of the services that we offer, but we're here to help small businesses on a number of points. So we'll continue to communicate that out to you as we move forward with this session. I want to turn it over to Brenda really quickly and see if she's able to just do a little intro about herself. And she's got that entrepreneurial spirit as well. So we're really thrilled to have her.
Hi guys, hopefully you guys can hear me.
We're good to go.
Good. Okay. A little bit of background about me. I've been mostly in marketing, working with agencies, and I just recently, even though my career has been very short, it has been very intensive and fast growing in the e-commerce space digitally. And for the last 6 years, I grew a startup from 0 to 9 figures, and now I'm helping other e-commerce brands do the same online, and developing a brand, a marketing strategy, and knowing how to talk to your customers. So customer service and making sure you're educating and adding the most value to your customer. I have found that to be the most fulfilling in a company.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. And it's really not only this amazing panelists that we have, but a lot of you who have chosen to join us. So I just want to thank you one more time. Something else that we're going to be doing, and Alejandro will be able to get this going, is that we're also going to do a bit of an audience check. One of the things that we find when we work with small businesses is that everyone has a bit of a different business, whether it's a service-based, a product-based, or a physical brick and mortar. And sometimes that can affect the way that your communication strategy needs to go. So we're going to start a poll here in the chat. If everyone can take a second and move forward on taking that, that'll help us just right size the questions as we move forward to kind of see where everyone is that's attending this session, because we really want to make sure that what we're doing is actually helpful to all of you. But in the meantime, while we're taking that poll, I do want to turn it over to Luis and Bob and Brenda, and really just, I think the first thing is, Bob, at the start is, what is a communication plan? Oh, Bob, you're on mute. Just
Good morning, excuse me, good afternoon. So communication plans are simply just a plan on how you plan to communicate with your customers and clients over the next period of time, both during and post-pandemic. It's really critical that you evaluate and do an inventory of all the communication platforms you've been using, whether it's been traditional, what we call earned media, those are like press releases to the local media, broadcast, print, otherwise, or whether you're using social media and all the platforms involved there. So you need to do an inventory of what you actually have available to you and how you plan to do that. Also do an inventory of the communications that you had planned pre-pandemic, to see whether or not they're still timely, are they appropriate, and has the tone changed given all of the sacrifices people are having to deal with now. So plan that out, look at what your inventory is, and then plan the kinds of messaging you're going to push out to your customers and clients over the next period of time. I will remind everyone that it's going to be very critical that what your clients are looking for are sort of the basics. And primary to everything else is what are you doing to ensure that you're going to ensure their safety if you have a brick and mortar store and you're open now, or if you have a restaurant and what you're going to do with regards to safety. That's the number one concern that consumers have now. And you need to reassure your folks that you're adhering to all the recommended guidelines set out by the CDC and other health advocates to get them to even feel comfortable to come in and see you in the first place. And how are you putting into place the kinds of things that, that are going to provide the least amount of disruption to the goods and services you can provide your clients. So that essentially is a plan. Write it down, check it, recheck it, go back to it, pivot if you have to, because things change on a daily basis, particularly in this given time.
that is so true. And just so you all know, we'll be dropping a link in as well to a checklist that Bob has so kindly made of a breakdown that you can take back with you of what a communication plan is. I think one of the biggest things you spoke about was really addressing consumer fear and speaking about value. Luis, in terms of working with a number of the small businesses, how do you think that during this, this crucial time, how do you address consumer fear and show value in your messaging?
That's a great question. I think that the first thing that's really important with this and just creating a communication plan is to listen. Too many times we make the mistake of just reacting and pushing what we want to say versus listening to what's going on in the environment. So today we need to listen to our consumers and understand what are they most fearful, what are their needs, and what are they asking for. I think secondly is once you create that communication or response, you want to make sure that it stays focused. It stays focused on those needs of the consumer. It stays focused on what value your organization can provide to address those fears or those needs, and making sure that how you disseminate that communication is consistent across all platforms. And then the last thing I think is you got to be responsive. So once you listen, once you get a focused communication out there, understanding that communication is a two-way street. It's not just your organization communicating to your prospects or clients. It's also allowing them to communicate back, and then your organization or your company or yourself being able to respond to those questions or whatever clarity needs to be provided or any dialogue that you're having between you and that target audience.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think one of the big things is how, if you don't necessarily already know and you're looking to communicate out, how do you know where your customers are and how to reach them?
Yeah, I think now more than ever, digital media, so for example, social media is a great place to be used as a listening tool that's out there for free, right? So, one of the things that I always tell small business owners, and I specifically work with CPG brands and people in the food and beverage business, so that's an easier space because you can use hashtags to go on either Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and use a hashtag to go and see what people are saying about a specific industry or about your business in particular. I think something that's even more important that people forget is the more, if you're a small business in a community, you have to be micro, right? So reach out to, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, reach out to your businesses that are around you, reach out to your local community to see what do they need, what are they asking, and what do you need to respond to?
Yeah, and I think that's so great when we talk about the CPG space. You and I have a similar background, Luis. But speaking of someone who's really moved forward in scaling her own business, I'd like to turn it over to Brenda. Brenda, how has the role of technology impacted your ability for communication as you scaled your business?
Oh, it's so important because you get to reach a larger audience without taking all that overhead. So if you're a brick and mortar company and you establish a brand online and you transfer that establishment, that trust with your customers online, you're now able to reach a bigger audience through occasion. And so every single platform that you use, and you'll be able to see through the data of how many people are visiting, and then you get to understand more about your customers. You get that analytical data that you might not have offline, and you can cross see that data online, offline. So my online store was able to get and help 2 million people every single month, and I would never be able to do that offline. But now that I have that data online, I'm able to serve my customer offline a lot better. So I think you can really leverage what you get online and building that stronger trust and communication. And just like what we say, bringing that brand consistency throughout all the platforms is really going to be able to get that trust for your customers. And they're going to choose you over and over because the customer has a strong, powerful buying power. And so for them to really hand over that dollar to you means so much to them because they have chose you, they have gained that trust online or offline. And so technology online has been very powerful.
Yeah, and I think we have a lot to talk about when it comes to technology, but really in speaking about the communication, I know certainly one of the biggest things to do before you start talking about the details is to get that communication in place. So I'd like to ask Bob, in terms of developing not just the communication strategy, which certainly is relevant right now, but getting your core communication down before you send it out in different channels, what is your best advice in working with small businesses to be able to lock in those key points?
So my advice would be, and I'll just kind of reiterate what Louise said earlier, is listen to your customers. What do your customers want to know about your business and its operations and kind of this weird time we're in right now? And I think that what they're going to want to know is, are you going to be able to develop the goods and services that you've been developing? If so, what contingency plan do you have given the current pandemic? Are there going to be interruptions on the supply chain? Am I going to be able to go into your store and feel safe when I go in there? Listen to your customers, find out what it is that they want, and then craft your messages around there, and understand that you need to speak to your customers in their language, whether it's Spanish or some Asian dialect or just plain English. Hone your messages around that and deliver them and be succinct. Don't be lengthy, don't be wordy. Shorter is better, but to the point, and constant communications over and over. You need to over communicate during this time.
Sure. And it looks like we've got quite a few service providers in the room here. So I think it's going to be one of the helpful things to speak to that. And one of the biggest things is, are you open? When will you reopen? And taking that communication strategy and repeating it over and over. Luis, I'd love to know from your perspective, like, how can small businesses, once they've started listening to their customers, how do they start strengthening their digital presence in order to communicate?
Well, I think first of all, it requires consistency, right? So there's a lot of people that just in general, over the last 6 months, especially in Orange County, we've been doing a lot of volunteer work with small businesses under 5 years of service and under $500,000 of revenue. And one of the things that we've seen at mass is just the lack of consistency in communication. And so when you start, even though digital platforms are really good, they're only really good when you use them consistently. So for example, the more you post, the more you work yourself up the algorithm, which means that you're going to start showing up more in people's feeds, even the people that follow you. If you're only posting once a week on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, there's less likely chance that you're going to be seen. So something that's really important, and there's a lot of tools out there that are easy to use now, is we now, when we volunteer with someone, we do 30 days out of communication. So especially on the digital platform. So there's simple calendars out there from a variety of resources. And I'm sure that even BIZCON probably has one where we literally line up 6 themes of communication that the organization wants to talk about. And we do 6 imagery themes so that we stay consistent. And within 2 hours, we do an outline of what it is, when we're going to show up, and how we're going to show up both visually and from a word perspective. That lets you be consistent, lets you know you have a game plan, and then it assures that we're showing up at least 3 times a week in these digital platforms. Of course, that varies by category or business, but I would say on average, especially now, if you've been closed, you should at least be posting 3 times a week to make sure that people know that you're still around.
And let's dive into that a little further. So there's a lot of things, there was great advice that you said here. One is you spoke about the key digital channels, right? So what are the key digital channels every small business should be on right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that there's that has a separate question. I think first I'd ask is, are you a product business or a service business, right? I think that you mentioned that a lot of folks that were on the channel right now are service providers.
Absolutely.
And so for example, I think if you're a service provider, you should be on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is such an awesome resource where there are a ton of professionals. The algorithm is still really awesome. I mean, you don't have to be an expert on LinkedIn. Like, you don't have to have beautiful pictures or photography on LinkedIn to connect with people. And so that's a great way for you to position yourself as a service provider of what you do, your opinion on the latest trends, and how people can connect with you. So LinkedIn is for sure. Facebook's got the largest just number of people on a platform. And so, you know, different people will argue whether young people are not on there anymore, or it's just my grandparents that are on there, or is it that Gen Z's on TikTok? The truth of the matter is Facebook is still the largest platform and ecosystem, and it's got a great and cheap way to target people all the way down to a zip code, right? So you could literally, you know, for $10 a month or a week, you know, touch 1,000 people, which there's no other, like even 10 years ago, if you wanted to touch 1,000 people, you literally had to go knock, you know, 1,000 doors or call 1,000 people on the phone. You can do that for $10, right? And so I would say LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram is good as well, as if you are good with photography, and Twitter to some extent. And then, you know, I also said at the beginning, depending on what kind of business, if you're a product business, I definitely would say figure out how to use TikTok, because even though it's a lot of very young people on there, for a lot of parents, they're influenced by their kids, right? And so that's an opportunity. But for the service providers, I would say LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter are good ways of disseminating information and other things.
Great, thank you so much. And then I think the big thing, Bob, it was so helpful when you were speaking about a communication plan, a little bit of a differentiation here. Is a communication plan different from your marketing plan?
Absolutely. You know, when you talk about marketing, you're talking about actually promoting goods and services. You know, what is it? What's the value proposition you're offering? When you're putting together a communication plan, you're focused on how you're going to communicate every aspect of your business, from the hours that you're open to the kinds of products you do carry, ensuring the folks that, you know, you have provided a safe environment to come and visit your store or eat at your restaurant. So very, very different in terms of marketing, because with a communication plan, you're not so much promoting a product or a service, but you're promoting your business, which is kind of the bricks and mortar and the very foundation of which you operate. So slightly different. There is some crossover, but for the most part, they are different plans.
Right. And then, what I would say, Brenda, I just want to make sure we've got a good connection, but when you offer different products and services as you work to scale your business, do you need to develop a different communication plan for each service customer profile?
I think the better question is, how do you put your message out there on different platforms? So I think it's the same customer base with the same messaging. Is just how are you putting that out there on different channels? And how Luis mentioned LinkedIn and Facebook, those are totally different channels that you can curate your message of how it's going to be digested. And same with other platforms. So the message that you will put out there for the same customer base, it would be, LinkedIn would be more text heavy rather than Facebook with more video, and Instagram would be more pictures. So the same messaging in types of formats, so they can be better digested for the same customer.
Great. And then, we're talking a lot about technology, but I think one of the big things, we're in a time where it's about to be a little old fashioned again. Instead of just the communication you push out, it's about how your customers perceive you. So I'd love to see, Luis, seeing as you've worked with CPG and a lot of product, big question is, how do you prepare your employees and your customers to be brand ambassadors for your product and your company?
That's a great question. I think there's in my opinion, there's two ways to do that over time. One is making sure that from an internal perspective, your employees are always part of the communication internally. And what that means is, as you're making especially for small businesses, which is the people that we have here, many of them, you want to make sure that however your supply chain is, whether someone's in marketing or communication or not, if they're for example, they're the person developing your website, they're the person doing all the engineering on your back end, you want to make sure that those people are always part of the conversation, and that you're always keeping them in mind and in tune with any brand work you're developing, any communications plan you're developing, any PR you're developing, because your greatest ambassadors will always be your employees. And you want to make sure that whatever message that is that you're going to put out in a commercial or PR plan, that everybody in your organization understands what those 2 or 3 critical messages are, right? So that it's consistent there, and always involving them, because too many times, what I have seen, even at the big corporate level where there's a lot of resources, is, for example, going back to what the difference between a communication plan and a marketing plan are. A lot of organizations will do that in silos, and that's a huge mistake. You want to make sure that whatever the communication plan is, whatever the marketing plan is, whatever the brand plan is, whatever the digital marketing plan is, that's all happening together at one table, because when it works beautifully, right? The reason why companies like an Apple, for example, can pull off a brand that lasts forever is that not only do they have a great brand development, but they bring everything to the table directly. So everything fires at the same time, with the same message, with the same people, right? So you want to make sure that that's all collective. And then in terms of how do you do that for your customers, I think it's just, I think it's 2 things. One, make sure that you're consistently, communicating across all your channels. So if you have 2 or 3 different target audiences, remember that, however it is that you're distributing that, whether it's through digital or if you have a sales force on the floor, that they're getting the same messaging to take out to their folks as we're putting on the digital spaces. And I also think, especially for your consumers, the best way to do it is to ask, right? You want to make sure to ask them questions, ask for feedback. Like, the power of feedback through surveys or however you can do that allows that conversation to become more personal and more engaging. And then when you're ready to connect and communicate, you're going to have a higher degree of success.
And you know, one of the things is there is a way in which, as a small business, it's where you get started on really making sure that that internal communication with your employees and your staff, you can start small before you grow. And that's really the benefit that I've seen, is that you're not in silos, you're not quite corporate, you're not as big. You usually get the chance to speak to everyone a little personally, really bring them on board with what you're trying to do. I think the big thing is a lot of businesses look at communication plans and marketing and they're like, what are these numbers? What are these analytics? What is this data? What am I supposed to do with this? Right? So the big thing I always get questions about is, how do you even get started with these analytics? And Brenda, you spoke a lot about digital strategy, so I'll turn it over to you on this. What do you do with the analytics from these tools? Where do you even get started?
Yes, so my background is actually in accounting and I love numbers and data, and numbers don't lie. And it's a story. You just have to decipher that story from the numbers. The answer in numbers. So to just social media and Instagram, I have, when I work of the Instagram, and it tells you when your customers go at what time of the day, at what day of the week, and so that is the story telling you this is your most engagement time. Let's post every single Wednesday at 6 p.m. because everybody's on there. And so doing that offline and online, it's a story and how you're able to give back the feedback through those numbers.
Great, thank you so much. And Luis, jumping back to your conversation about Facebook, where do you start with the Facebook analytics? What are some quick ways that our businesses can look at those numbers and know what to do next?
A great question. I think taking a step back from that is you first need to ask yourself, what is it you're trying to do, right? So before you even take action, and in order to actually, because data is only as good as your ability to translate that into an action, right? And so you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to do on a digital platform? Are you trying to gain awareness of your brand? Are you trying to gain followers to your social media platform? Or are you actually trying to sell now? And those are three different distinct actions and targets that you need to take. So I think first you ask yourself that question, and based on what the answer is to that, you go from there. So for example, if you just started your Facebook page last week, it's going to be really hard to transact on that page right away. So you got to understand that. And I think this is a really important point for everybody is there's a lot of small businesses that haven't invested in marketing. And so, you know, when they see this or they hear this and they say, well, should I spend $300 a month on advertising on Facebook? Sometimes their thought is, well, I can spend those $300 a month on, you know, paying an employee a couple of extra hours. But the truth is that there is a place for marketing, and you need it to grow. And if you compare the cost, I would compare marketing right now and the ability to market on social media as such a cheap way to do it and efficient, because it's almost like if we were 1940 and television advertising had just started. It's that cheap, right? Relative to the reach. And so I would say, understand what you want to do, understand who you want to talk to, and then those analytics will tell you, is the message you put out there doing that? And if not, it's time to either adjust your message, adjust your voice, or maybe you just have the wrong target audience, right? But I think you first need to understand what you're trying to do before you can translate what those numbers are saying.
Right. Thank you so much. And I think I want to say, as communication experts and marketers, sometimes we use a lot of phrases that our small businesses are not sure about. And so when we say analytics, we all know that that means looking at data and seeing what the data can tell us, right? But one thing I want to touch base on is Brenda was speaking about Instagram and Luis is speaking about Facebook. We're talking about those analytics. I just want to clarify that when you develop a Facebook profile, there's the ability, as you develop one for your business, to go in and look at the analytics through Facebook. Also, when you post on Instagram and you create a business profile, you have the ability to then go look at those analytics through the app itself. So just to clarify where we're looking at these numbers, in case any of our small businesses are not quite sure, and we can also put some information about that in the chat as well. I want to turn it over to really taking that step back. Bob, I think the big thing, and this is what Louise touched on, is this is all about the storytelling. Are you trying to sell something? Are you trying to build a brand awareness? Or are you just trying to say one specific thing to your customers? Like perhaps we are going to be open in September. Come back and join us, right? So those are a little bit of different things. What really is that storytelling, and why does it really matter right now?
Well, it really matters now because, you know, we've built brand loyalty around, you know, the quality of the product, but more so you're finding out with the new generation is you want to find out whether or not a company is socially responsible. Are they listening to what's happening out in the public domain right now, whether it's Black Lives Matter or racial harmony or segregation or equal rights and opportunity or DACA? You know, what kind of a company am I supporting? You know, and so you'll see companies stumble over themselves to tell stories about who they are, what they're about, and what they stand for. I mean, what are the pillars of your foundation for community giving? They want to know that if I'm going to purchase a product from this particular company, that they are socially responsible. And that's playing a bigger part now, more so now than ever, with large corporations and small companies. And so part of that story is, how did you start? You know, did you start on, you know, on a dime, you know, and starting to build your business? You know, what was your target audience? You know, who are your employees? You know, what is your value proposition? All of that is a story that people want to know. They want to know the story behind Starbucks. They want to know the story behind, you know, ABC Company. They want to know the story behind Milagro Strategy Group. And so that story is very important. And so you need to weave that story into your communications as you go out there. So when people know that they're purchasing your goods or services, that they're indeed doing business with the kind of a business owner that has the same sort of morals, values, business ethics that I respect and want to do business with.
That's true. And thank you so much for saying that, because I think really it's about trust, right? We're really going through a tough time. And what we're looking to do, I think, is to really reconnect with each other in this fractured situation that we've been in terms of the global pandemic. And as we look to reconnect, I think one of the big things, Bob, I'd love for you to follow up is not just your story, but the need for authenticity right now is really high. And do you have any tangible examples of a business that has succeeded in that right now? Or a government official that's been able to really slice through a lot of the noise and really speak authentically to the points and what they stand for?
So it's interesting. You know, one of our clients at Milagro is Northgate Gonzalez Markets. If you're not familiar with them,
Absolutely.
they're a family-owned grocery store chain, favorite of mine. And we've taken them. We've been their agency of record for the last year and a half. And obviously, we went from doing a lot of promotions to a lot of crisis work in light of pandemic. Obviously, frontline essential workers, grocery stores, etc. You know, this is a company that's built over the last 40 years. They're currently in their 40th anniversary. Built a lot of goodwill in the communities they serve because it's just the nature that they have. And if you look at their social media, you know, people love them. You know, they just love Northgate Markets. And I'll just give you a story that, you know, when we were undergoing a couple of weeks ago, a lot of the protests that unfortunately turned to some of the riots and looters that we had, there was a store, one of the stores in Anaheim, where there was a protest that started about 3 blocks from that particular store. And as we've seen in some of the news media play out, there was some looting. There was essentially going to start, and there were looters who were attempting to break into one of the Northgate markets in Anaheim, and they did. And as they did that, a woman who was, unbeknownst to us, was in the parking lot, and as a regular shopper, actually drove her van into the front door to block any looters from going into the store. Now, this is someone who was just a customer, someone who we didn't really point out, but the fact that she drove her van to block the store from being looted with her own van, it kind of tells you the kind of relationship they have with their customers. And so that's because we've tried to be transparent throughout this entire process. You know, there was a debate and discussion on whenever one of the employees was tested positive for COVID-19, whether or not we were going to convey that to our audiences at the grocery store. And we said, absolutely, we have to be transparent. And so not only that we post a notice on the door for the customers, we also posted on social media. You know, we put it out on the company's website and we let them know. And most of the comments we got back on social media were, thank you very much. You know, our prayers are with this particular associate. And so again, we were being very transparent and very authentic and really servicing the needs of our particular audience. And so we have not been hit with any boycotts. We haven't been hit with a lot of looting. I think there's only 2 stores that were looted, and it was minimal. And it was the customers who basically prevented the looters from going in. So we really need to be authentic. You need to be transparent as possible because, as you mentioned, trust is the overriding factor. I want to be able to trust the business I'm doing business with.
And thank you so much for those tangible examples. I think when we talk about these terms, brand loyalty and trust and authenticity, it's kind of a little confusing sometimes of what does that translate to? And if it translates as far as a customer blocking a physical business from being looted, that is a true success story of how your communication and your communication plan and your strategy translates to both protecting your business and having customers continually return. So thank you so much. That's a great example and I really appreciate it. I think one of the big things is a lot of businesses are sitting here, in addition to thank you for joining us at BIZCON. Again, I want to just plug one more time, Bixel Exchange, we're here to help you. Feel free to sign up. But when it comes to a communication plan, how do businesses even start to ask for help? And Luis, I'd love to turn it to you just to see if you can speak about the way that small businesses are looking to ask for help. Do you hire people? Do you do it internally? Do you get interns? What's a really good strategy for a small business moving forward?
Yeah, thank you. I think what was awesome and just connecting back, I was listening to the Nelly Galvan speak right before this, and she was ending her conversation on speaking about exactly this, like what is it that we need to do? And I think the first thing is asking for help. We've seen so many people in our community, especially in the Latino community. And I've done a ton of work in diverse segments, so Hispanic, Asian, African American communities, and we haven't been good at reaching out, and we need to. There's some things around pride or lack of understanding, but today, for example, just in Orange County, in LA County, San Diego County, Riverside County, you have the SBDC, you have SCORE, you have the chambers, you have many Latina women business associations. So I think depending on what you feel most comfortable with, you just need to reach out. And me, myself, 3 years ago, before joining Food Beast, I tried to launch a business. I actually went and spoke to probably like 10 different consultants at SCORE and SBA and couldn't believe that all these resources were free, and that the chambers had a lot of programs. So I think just reaching out in your own community and interviewing these people, right? Because they're there, and sometimes it's just a matter of finding the ones that have the best subject matter expertise in what you're going to do, finding the ones that you get along with the most so that you can understand each other. And even with language, there's potentially some people that need Spanish language assistance or one of the Asian languages. I know that the LA Chamber and Bixel Exchange and some other organizations have those resources now to be able to support. So like I said earlier, I wish that, 30 years ago, my father would have been able to reach out and knew how to reach out, because I think that there is a ton of help. I just think it's a matter of understanding where to go and get it. And then just letting down your guard, right? And because we're all, as part of being an entrepreneur, is making mistakes. And I think that we all know that. And so letting down your guard so that you can be honest with what it is you need and what you're struggling with, so that the resource providers like yourself can help us out in an impactful way.
Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, it's a humbling experience to start a business, to grow a business, and to move forward in this world and speak to your customers. So we are here to help, but not just us. There's a whole network. If you're not sure, feel free to reach out. But everyone wants to see small businesses succeed. I truly believe that small business is the backbone of Los Angeles. And in COVID, I will tell you all that the data has proved that out. And I've done quite a bit of marketing work, and I love numbers too, because the data shows us how much we need small businesses and how much we want them to grow and how many people that they employ. In Los Angeles, 1 out of every 2 people is employed in a small business. That's a massive number. So again, we are here to help. I do want to just round out the end of the session. Again, thanks so much to everyone for joining us. Given the time that we are in, and Bob, thank you so much for addressing this as well. I'd love to have you touch base one more time on how do small businesses talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion at this time?
I think at this time it's important not only to talk about diversity and inclusion regarding, you know, the goods, products, and services that you deliver, but your workforce. Does your workforce reflect the community? You know, and you know, we've been talking about communications. I just remind people that, you know, there's external communications. We've been focusing a lot on that, but you also have to understand internal communication would be really important, because after all, your employees are your ambassadors, and you should by all means keep them apprised of what you're communicating to the general public, because, you know, as they interface with the public, they need to be able to sound the same sort of message you're sending out there in terms of what you stand for and your goods and services you deliver, and et cetera, et cetera. That can be important. But right now, I think more so now than ever, in light of COVID-19, in light of what's happening with Black Lives Matter, and kind of this sort of awakening to the reality of racism in America, it's going to be more important to convey to your audience, to your clients, to customers, you know, what you stand for in terms of social activism, in terms of eliminating racism in today's world. And of course, big issue that's going to be coming up here in California again is affirmative action. We're going back one more time on that whole issue. So you know, it's funny because I'm kind of reliving the 70s for me, the late 60s and 70s. And we had this conversation back then. It's now coming up, but it's certainly more energized than it was back then. And it's a younger generation that's picking up the conversation. But all of that, to say all of that, it's going to be very important to convey that. And it might be kind of your mission statement, within your mission statement of your company. Maybe you incorporate in that. Maybe you incorporate it in your pillars and what you stand for in terms of a company. And if you can convey that to your audience and customers and it resonates with them, then you have customers for life.
Great, thank you so much. And Luis, I'm gonna say, it's gonna be the same question just to wrap us up. How do these small businesses talk about diversity and equity in the current situation that we are in? Black Lives Matter, anti-Black racism is very top of mind. What do we say? What do we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing I say about that is be authentic, right? You got to make sure that whatever you're going to communicate is not just a post or a communication strategy, even though that's what we're talking about, but understanding that if you're going to take the mic right now and say that, and what you say, that you really mean that, and you're going to articulate that in the mission of your organization. Because we know that nothing can change unless action really happens. And so I would strongly recommend that as organizations are ready to speak out or create, whether it's a diversity and inclusion program, a supplier diversity program, some multicultural program, especially now, I hate the word program because it can't be a program. It's got to be the way you do business, right? And so kind of stepping back and saying, what can we do authentically to support this movement of diversity, and then go out and communicate what that means, right? Because I what I'd love to see is, after kind of this all, you know, plays out, you're going to be able to see who is really authentic and who wasn't just putting out a commercial, right? And who actually went and hired more diverse, especially at the big corporate level, like who went and hired more board members that were diverse, who hired more executives that were diverse, who hired more people in the positions that make decisions more diverse, and how our budgets, for example, I don't know if you guys know this, but for example, in the Hispanic community, only like 2% of all philanthropic dollars today go to Hispanic focused organizations. And so that, you know, like how our organization is going to change those things, and efforts in the Black communities to really reflect what they're doing at the core of their mission, and then aligning your communication to that, because as Robert said earlier, people will remember, when you build a brand and when you're authentic. I think about Northgate, and I think about other companies like that where people are taking actions and are brand ambassadors because they know that they're not just putting out a commercial, they're actually walking the walk.
Yeah, absolutely. And then thank you so much for that. And it really is true. A lot of the work that, I'll say once again, that we do with Pixel, but also all our partners, you talked about SCORE and PACE, but we have so many community partners that we work with. I'll tell you that there is a whole network, and those philanthropic dollars can go towards not only helping other small businesses like yourself, but one of the work that we do, and I'm going to shamelessly promote it because I've got interns right now. And so we are looking to place interns in small businesses and in businesses to help them learn tools. And so feel free to reach out for us more at Pixel. We've got resources for you for underrepresented interns in order to get them placed into your businesses and learn from you as we move forward. Brenda, I just want to close out with you. I know this sounds a little choppy. What is the best strategy that you have so far for speaking about the current situation and taking action and then putting into a communication plan about diversity and inclusion and Black Lives Matter right now?
Yes, I always say that branding is like a person. Your brand, your company, what you do is like a person. And if you can really stick to your core values, your customers will relate to what you stand for. And so taking a strong stand and communicating with your customers and your employees, because your employees are also looking at you to see what are you doing about this matter. And I believe that the employees internally and the customers externally will stick with you through whatever situation and current events that happen, and showing that story. Let me show my customers and employees what I'm doing about this issue. If it's philanthropic, if it's this month, 10% of our sales is going to this cause because we believe in it. And how do you portray that story out digitally or offline? And I think people and customers will really relate to your core values, and they'll stick with you no matter how challenging the current events get. Is just being authentic and telling that story of what responsibility you're taking.
Great. Thank you so much. Again, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for being here. I know that we're getting ready to wrap up this session, but I did want to point out that we have a number of resources that we put into the chat. Bob, thank you so much for working up the details. Everyone can go grab that link if you'd like to do a little more absorption on your own about what a communication plan is, some of the comments that we've made. A lot of good resources and information are in there. So Bob, thank you so much for working that up. And I want to say, Brenda, Luis, it's been so amazing to have both of you. And again, and if you would like to move forward, potentially getting an intern and find out more, I've got the link for the Tech Talent Pipeline, which is what we do. You can sign up there and get one-on-one advising with the work that Pixel Exchange does. But overall, I say, here at the Chamber and with the work that we do with Pixel Exchange, we just really want to help small businesses. And so thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, not only to our panelists, but for all of you taking time out of your busy day to join us here. So we just really appreciate it. And we're really looking forward to having the LA region move forward with more thoughtfulness and better communication and to be better connected.
So now we're going to talk about what's next. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us here. We have a few messages on the chat that said great information. They extremely appreciate everything that you've said on here today. So what's next? Head over to the stage, which you'll find on the left-hand side, and you'll be able to join the virtual happy hour and prize drawings. We have DJ Raul Campos from KCRW, complete with, of course, like I mentioned, great music and great drawings. Then you can also head over to the Expo Hall area where you can connect with resources and live representatives from our BIZCON partners. Check out the networking session where you can speed network and connect with fellow attendees to keep your conversations going beyond this point. Also, we'd like to have you go over to the Expo Hall And be sure to stop by the LA Chamber family booths. So we have LA Area Chamber. You can find information there on all the programs that we have going on and membership. We have the Bixel Exchange, SBDC. And this here, you can find out what offers we have. There's a wide range of free programs, just like Tova mentioned earlier, and services, including one-on-one advising. You've already received some of the links, and if you go into that booth, you'll also receive this information again. We have Southern California Leadership Network, an affiliate of the Chamber. SCLN offers fellowship and leadership development programs. Again, one final thank you to our supporters who made today possible. Thank you again. Please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. I hope we get to connect again soon. Luis, Bob, Brenda, you've all been amazing. And thanks to all the small businesses for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.